I was in a Jeep in Pearl Harbor, and a bomb from an airplane, a Japanese airplane, went off right near me, and it blew the whole Jeep off the pier, and I went into the water with it. I was like, holy cow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about patient experiences, because over the years I've had a lot of patient experiences. One of the things that I found was important was to find out when their original injury was. So I'm a chiropractor. Most of you watching this will be chiropractors or in healthcare. And when you have arthritis comes from abnormal biomechanics. It's when a body part starts aging faster than normal. And so I started realizing, well, there had to be something that caused the abnormal biomechanics. Something made that L5 stop moving the way it was supposed to move. So I would start asking questions. It was very interesting that when I asked these questions, the question I asked most was like, when was the first time you ever experienced this? Did you ever have an injury that could have caused it? So over the years, I've realized in dealing with patients that when, most of them came in with chronic degenerative arthritis, and I saw lots and lots of patients. We're talking back early in my career, 30 plus years ago, but a lot of patients came in and they had chronic degenerative arthritis. Well, if you look at what causes chronic degenerative arthritis, it's abnormal biomechanics. It means joints not moving properly. And what that does is it causes the joint to age faster than normal. So a lot of times people say, well, arthritis comes from an aging process. Well, that wouldn't make sense if you look at somebody's x-rays or you examine them, you find out that they have certain joints that are degenerating faster than others. Something had to precipitate that advanced aging. So I started realizing there was an injury. They had some sort of injury. I mean, chronic degenerative arthritis is probably the most common ailment that people suffer with. So I started looking for the injury. And the injury was an old injury that they had. So I'd ask the question, well, how long have you had this? When was the first time you ever experienced it at any degree? And they would go back and start looking like, well, I remember having it in college. Okay, did you ever have an injury before that could have caused it? Every time I asked that question, like 99% of the time, this is the answer I got. Oh no. Never had an injury? Nope. Never fell down when you were learning how to walk? Nope. Never fell out of a tree when you were a kid? Never fell off a bike? Never. I didn't say those things because that would invalidate the person I was talking to, but I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make sense. Everybody falls down when they learn how to walk. Everybody falls off a bike. Everybody falls out of a tree or off a swing. So how's this even possible? So I started asking certain questions that I found would trigger their memory. So I would say, well, have you ever been in a car wreck? No. Well, yeah, but not a bad one. Well, tell me about that. And I'd have them start to tell me about it. Or have you ever broken any bones? Yeah, but what's that got to do with anything? Or have you ever been knocked unconscious? Yeah, but what's that got? That was a long time ago. So I'd ask these questions and I'd ask, well, what happened? And then I started getting these stories, and some of the stories were fantastic. Now, when I first started practicing, I was practicing in the early 1990s. There was a lot of World War II vets still around. And a lot of them were in their senior years, and they were in their 70s and some of them in their 80s, and they wanted to get treated. So they'd come in and I'd hear these amazing stories. One of the stories I heard was, well, no, actually, I was in a Jeep. I was in a Jeep in Pearl Harbor, and a bomb from an airplane, a Japanese airplane, went off right near me, and it blew the whole Jeep off the pier, and I went into the water with it. I was like, holy cow. Another one told me that, yeah, well, I was a paratrooper in World War II. When I said the unconscious one, he goes, I was unconscious once. I'm like, what happened? Well, I was with the 101st Airborne, I think that was who it was, and we parachuted into Holland after D-Day. And he said, most of it was unopposed, but when I landed on the field, my parachute landed on top of me and I was pulling it off my face. And just as I pulled it off my face, the last thing I saw was a farmer with a shovel, wham, hit me right across the face, and I was knocked unconscious, and I woke up in a German POW camp. I was like, that is unbelievable. Those stories that I heard were just amazing. I asked him, I said, well, when you're in a POW camp, how'd they treat you? He goes, well, when I went in, I was like 145 pounds, but when I came out, I was like 85 pounds. I'm like, they were starving you? And he said, they were starving too. He said, a lot of them had ropes. It was towards the end of the war, and a lot of them had ropes holding up their pants because they were losing so much weight because there wasn't enough food for anybody. I was like, man, these times were really different back then, but these were some of the stories I heard, and I realized that you have to actually dig to get them to find it. What I also noticed was When they realize what was the initial injury, the value of what you're doing goes through the roof. So when they realized, okay, I got hurt in 1944 in Europe, and here it is 1995, 50 years later, and I have this problem. And this kid just asked me a question, and I realized that's when it started. I have this problem with my neck, and it's because I got hit in the face with a shovel by a Danish farmer in Holland in World War II. Just incredible stories like that. I've told other stories in earlier videos, but just some pretty amazing ones. You know, I remember one guy was a pilot, and he was more Vietnam era, and he was a pilot on an aircraft carrier. And he told me, you know, because we talk about whiplash and car accidents, and chiropractors see a lot of that. To give you an idea, he said, when I was a pilot, the instructions were that there was a guy on the deck with a catapult, and I had to get everything ready, and then there was a headrest that went up way above my head. And I had to get everything ready. I had to lean my head back against the headrest and salute. And when I did, he'd hit the catapult. And if he hit the catapult early, he was court-martialed for ruining the career of a pilot. That's the forces that would go through that pilot's neck. So it made me realize at that time, that's pretty amazing that, you know, we take these car accidents for granted, going 50 miles an hour down the road and somebody hitting you coming the other way, doing 40, and you spin around, well, that's a 90 mile an hour impact. So, you know, people take these things for granted, and they figure if they walk away, they never got hurt. But the damage could be done, and it could show up years later. And that's what I noticed. A lot of stories about, you know, falling, even when I was a kid, fell off a horse, got run over by a horse, was in a dirt bike accident, just pretty amazing stories. And if you're not asking your patients, you'll never hear them. And be prepared when you first ask them, they're gonna say, no, I never had an injury. Because that is, I ask our case managers that we train today, and they say, that's the same thing I get. Initially, people say, nope, never got injured. We have to kind of jar their memory. But when you do, then they start to realize, oh my gosh, this came back. I'll tell you one more story. I remember asking this woman, you ever been in an accident? Nope. Never had a car wreck? Nope. Never got hurt? No. Well, wait a minute, would a train accident be counted? And I'm like, were you in a train accident? And she goes, yeah, I was. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I was standing there holding the rail, you know, riding on the train, standing, and we're moving along, and I didn't know we were gonna get in a train accident. And next thing you know, I'm flying through the air, and she went like the length of the car, I guess, and smashed her head into the door on the opposite side. And I'm looking at her, she's standing like this, and I look over her x-ray, and her head's like this. I'm like, oh my gosh. No, that's what caused it. And she goes, that was 17 years ago. I'm like, yeah, that could do it, because she had degeneration at 3 vertebrae in her neck, and she didn't have it anywhere else. And she couldn't understand why she was having arthritis at that level. One last thing I'm gonna tell you. Whenever your patients tell you, well, my other doctor told me that I have this arthritis because I'm getting older, what I always did after that was I would say to somebody, well, that's pretty interesting, because yeah, you are degenerated at C3, C4, and C5. But let me ask you a question. How old is C2? And how old is L1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Because you don't have degeneration there. And the patient went, well, that doesn't make sense. I go, exactly. If it was from arthritis, you'd have it everywhere. If it was just from age, you'd have it everywhere. But if it's because part of your body is aging faster than the rest, that's why you have this problem. And if you understand the biomechanics, it's the motion that keeps them healthy, and restoring motion will prevent future degeneration. That's when the patient goes, now I know what you're trying to do, I'm in. Hope this helps.